So this session is looking at opportunities for improvement. I know that almost all of us were here from the previous one. So just a little bit of the difference. While that other one I wanted to talk a bit about risks. Oh, hello. Maybe I should stand on the stage. This one is more focused on the opportunities, those positive outcomes we talked about. And one of the key takeaways that I hope that you get out of it is that while risk tends to be looked at as when something has gone wrong and trying to make sure it doesn't happen again, we can look at the opportunity side as going, what can we do to prevent it from happening at all? So, come on. It's been a bit different. So we've kind of talked a little bit already about the difference between a compliance-focused and risk-based approach to conformance. Anyone want to jump in and give us some kind of idea of what this difference is? I know, asking you to do participation. No, that's okay. I guess this is my job, this bit. So essentially, this risk-based thinking is an essential form of effective management. It's looking at that whole process of what could go wrong, what could go right, but not in an isolated, one-off, this is risk. It's that overarching decision tree kind of how does this link into all of the bits and pieces. That we are doing. So risk-based thinking, the concept of it includes, sorry, it's all good? We're fine. We're always fine. We're having a good old time. The preventive actions to eliminate potential nonconformities, analysing the ones that have occurred, and then actions to prevent recurrence. It's that first bit there that I kind of want us to lean towards and focus on in this session, preventing potential ones. We want to be not just reactive, but proactive as well. So you should all be able to answer the next question. What is a risk? If I did my job well, you can. But I'm going to tell you a little story, similar, I guess, to my driving on the freeway one. It's an opportunity. I like it. So we've all heard of Cambridge, right? No, maybe. Great. So Cambridge does an entrance exam. It's known for being grueling to try and find the best of the best, the people who think outside the box and differently. Anyway, when it sort of started back up after COVID, I think it's about a 3-hour exam, there was one question on it. And the question was, what is a risk? And one student sat there and after about 20 minutes, got up, walked to the front, put his paper and pen down and left. And most people thought, oh, well, he's given up because I don't want to write for 3 hours what that is, I don't know. But he didn't. He'd written 2 words. His response was, this is. And I love this because it sits on a couple of different levels. One, taking that exam at all is a big risk. You could get into Cambridge or you could embarrass yourself. No, you could not. But also the fact that he only wrote 2 words to this grueling 3-hour exam and took that chance. He did end up getting into Cambridge because they kind of went, oh, that's a good answer. Kind of like that philosophy exam that was the question was, why? And the answer was, why not? Is it a risk? 100%. We don't know how the examiner is going to interpret that, but the outcome was positive. He lent into that uncertainty. We covered this definition a bit earlier, the effect of uncertainty on objectives. But the things I want to pull out, like we mentioned last time, when we're talking about an effect, it's a deviation from what's expected. And those, I keep pressing the laser button instead of the back button because it's there. So the effect of uncertainty on objectives, it could be positive, negative, both / neutral, depending on how you want to look at it. And the objectives is where you want to go. So he wanted to get into Cambridge. The effect of the person reading 2 words and being like, well, was the unknown. So they can have positive, negative, and they're typically associated with a negative impact, like we talked about earlier, or in the previous session, I should say. And there are several standards, as I already mentioned. There's 31,000 risk management. We have a risk management and laboratory course based on this standard. Come along. There is also the medical standard. And again, we have a specifically designed course. And if we think about for those that were here before, the lottery example and the horse race, you don't bet to lose, you bet to win. We always associate the risk with the negative. We may remember this graphic, and because we're leaning into our opportunities, Alistair thought that he would highlight here that opportunities appear just as frequently and indeed more than those 3 words. So for those that were new into this session from the previous one, the core purpose of the standards is to demonstrate consistent operations, that they can act impartially and then generate technically valid results. But risks and opportunities, risks certainly, appears more times than any of these central purposes, and in most cases, opportunities does as well. So risk-based thinking, and both 15189 and 17025 have this approach. And the idea is that regardless of what your process is, you have some kind of input, some kind of process, some kind of output. At every stage is where we're thinking about risks and opportunities. It is not an isolated one-off, let's do it and leave. It happens constantly. And what's the risk of our sampling not being accurate? Well, we do this, this, and this. And what's the risk of our technicians not being competent? We do this, this, and this, and so on. So the relationship, as we've mentioned a little bit, the positive impact or benefit, and then the opportunities that arise from managing risks. So what can we do in advance versus what has happened and how can we make that better? Gonna skip that one. So talking about from a non-conformity, which is the typical way that we've found laboratories tend to do risk management. What happened before, take a corrective action, and then reduce the possibility of recurrence. Or they go, well, this happened before, so let's do something different next time, preventive action. But this process follows and maps that same little process I had a bit earlier. Identify, assess, and then control or treat. And all of that is risk management. So while it can come from a non-conformity, it can come from that early step. Some of those questions you can ask yourself about any kind of situation: what could go wrong, or what could go right? How could it fail? How could it succeed? What's vulnerable to our organization? And what is going to stay the same? What is going to be able to withstand changes or mishaps in the system? And then how do we protect that value that we talked about just before? Our people, our processes, our in-house IVDs, and so on. So coming from 9001, that risk management standard, addressing both risks and opportunities establishes the basis of an effective management system and improved results. And while risk assessment is tending to lean towards this negative, risk assessment can be for opportunities as well. So I had before that risk management risk matrix and opportunity matrix. That's one example. So you might have been to the session yesterday that apparently was a packed house and people were being kicked out of the top 10 deficiencies. Who went, just so I know? Most of us. So for those that didn't get to go, you get a little bit of a recap of that. Rather than, does anyone remember what they all were? Or are you now just like, yeah, I went? Equipment, personnel, validation, audits, management reviews, validation. I don't remember now either. So we're going to click through them and have a quick look because we're going to do a little bit of an activity. Yeah, I'm going to make you do things. So method validation, verification, internal audits, reporting of results. It'll work eventually. Your QC, your QAPs, etc. Controlling of records and documents, technical records, external products and services, and then moving to our top 3, personnel, so your competencies, your records, your training records, etc. Management review inputs, and then equipment and everything that kind of comes with it. So I am going to get us to do a little activity. I have no idea how this is going to function, but we're going to make it up. I'm going to hand out, along with Naomi, a couple of standards. They're mine. I need them back. I like my job. We've got a couple of 15189 and a couple of 17025. It doesn't really matter which one you get in this case, because a lot of these particular points are more or less the same across them. So you're going to do this in a couple of little groups, just like, I don't think you can turn the chairs, but just the people around you. Have fun, talk to people, network. Step 1, I want you to pick one of those 10 deficiencies, the one that sounds the most interesting to you. Then I want you to find the particular clause in the standard. They're almost all listed as just the same title. Won't be too difficult. If you can't find it, shout out, I'll help. And then what you do is kind of look at what the minimum requirement is. The standard says what the minimum is. Then set a goal for how to do better than that. Design some kind of improvement and make a little bit of a plan. We might even share some of our thoughts afterwards. Be prepared to speak. Any questions before we jump into it? I'm going to give us about 5 to 10 minutes to do that. Silence is agreement, so yes. All right. So let's hear a couple of thoughts. It doesn't need to be a fully fleshed absolute plan, because I gave you a total of 5 minutes to do that, so well done. I'm going to do this broadly first, and then I'll pick on people. Would any group like to share?
Yes, we would.
Oh, fantastic. So firstly, which one did we choose? Which
Excuse me.
these ones did we use?
Technical records on
Beautiful.
ISO 1705.
Great.
Oh, thank you. Do I need it?
Yes, please.
Oops. Okay, so we chose technical records as the deficiency. We found the clauses that were relevant to the technical records. We set a goal for improvement. Do you want to, Vicky, do you want to help me out here?
We were thinking in terms of documenting all the relevant people who do an assay or a test that may not be the person who starts it. Maybe day 1, day 5, day 3, because the standard records only had one operator. So we had to redesign everything depending on what we were doing, and set new a document to show every aspect of who's done what part.
Great, love it. Thank you very much. Little round of applause. One more. Just one, and then we'll move on. Too slow. Normally I don't get this much. People be like... So which deficiency did we choose firstly?
6.4.4, equipment instructions for use. Equipment, sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to find it. Oh, number 1.
That's it.
The big one.
So the relevant clause 6.4.4, equipment instructions for use. We focused on this, and our goal for improvement was how do you actually set instructions? So you have to review manufacturer's manuals, create a procedure, and what was the other one?
So set it up in a library, both physical hard copy and data produced on screen. Of the equipment, the procedures for operation, have a training program for your operators within that, assess your competency of the operators, and then in the verification of how that is going, actually follow them, have all your operators working in the SQC scheme and monitor their SQC outputs against the baseline to see if they've got a trend high, trend low.
Excellent.
All correct.
Great. Little round of applause. So a really great example there. The standard just says that have that documentation available. What is it? How do we make sure that it's functioning? So at this point, we can kind of go back to some of those questions. What could go right with this? So how can we make sure our equipment is fit for purpose rather than waiting until NATA says, oh, this is a bit dodgy. So how do we do all of that in advance? How do we make sure that it does succeed? Which elements of it are going to be sustained even if we decide to change the system? The equipment itself is probably going to still be there. It might be all the back-end stuff. It might be the documents that come with it. So one way to do this is through the use of a SMART goal. Has anyone heard of these? I've heard too much of these. For those that haven't, it's just a structure to allow you to set a goal that's attainable, really. So going through making sure it is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and then has some kind of time frame attached to it. I know that for a lot of people, January 1st, setting their goals, and they're just like, I'm going to be healthier. What does...
I laughed really hard and it went like... Sorry.
It's one of
We've
these
all
things
been
that
there.
how do we measure that? How do you measure healthier? It's not specific. So is it a weight loss thing? Is it a fat percentage thing? Is it the amount of vegetables you're eating? How are you going to measure that in a specific way? And in what time frame? People are like, I'm going to lose 5 kilos. Great. By when? 10 years? Easy. 6 weeks? Maybe not so much. So having a time frame that is realistic, achievable, and relevant to your goals. Oh, this is all just the same bit there. New slides. If I get to any of these that you didn't see from the previous one, I'll go back to 10. Let me know so you can go to... So we had 10 validation verification. These are some of the examples. I'm not going to read through every one of them. Of the examples that come up quite frequently in our assessments that we see. So the idea here is that these are things that happen in other labs, right? So they're the areas where you go, okay, other labs are not doing proper estimates of measurement uncertainty in their verification or validation. So maybe we should. So this is where we're leaning towards those elements. Internal audits, one of the really common ones, unable to provide that objective evidence that the audit had some kind of training or qualification. So they haven't got a certificate, I don't know where to stand. So again, if other labs are doing this and getting these conditions against them, maybe we should make sure that we do have objective evidence. You're all just waiting now for the next slide, aren't you? Reporting of results. I'm going to give you 3 seconds for each one. So just ensuring the... I'm just watching them all come down and up. Ensuring our validity, so our QCs, controlling of records, and I'm going to face this way for the next minute. Technical records, so we had one of our groups look at this as our deficiency. Personnel, so your training records, not having a procedure related to competence. Management reviews. If you participate in our understanding ISO 15189 or 17025, we do an entire activity based upon that second one, which is the missing elements of the inputs, which is really exciting and fun to do. And lucky last, equipment. I'm not plugging the course or anything. The equipment having, for example, no metrological traceability, so making sure that we are then performing those. Did I miss one? Which one? I'm gonna... We did. It was a test. You were auditing us. Number 4, of course, being external products and services. Because you all knew that. Glad you were here to pick that up. So within 15189, it does specify that this idea of addressing opportunities leads to expanding our scope. It can lead to new technology, implementing, and again, taking back to the definition we looked at before about the outcome and that creating value that I mentioned in the previous session, leading to patient care. And if patients aren't what you deal with, never work with animals or children, maybe yours has to do with food. And so addressing opportunities allows for that safe outcome. So I know that we've kind of had a little bit of crossover with our previous session, and I'm trying, hopefully, to lean towards this Risks are often done as a static after the event, but ideally it's a dynamic process that continually is looked at before things go wrong, and try to look at the good, what good things can happen, as opposed to just what bad things can go wrong. And just because I'm not very nice, there's Alistair's information. So send him a message saying that I did very well.